Hello everyone, welcome and thank you for joining us at this wonderful conference about luxury industry and the health crisis. What is at stake? We would like to organize a conference that is specific with key insights, some takeaways that you can use in the future. I'm Alex Wehrlin. I'll be moderating this event. I'm the director of EBS International Business School in Geneva. So I'm really happy to be with you online today. I would like to thank especially la Banque Cantonale de Genève, who is hosting and organizing this event. Thank you very much. I would like to thank, of course, Audemars Piguet and Michael's presence today. Thank you as well. And iBlue communication agency that is based in Shanghai, in Hong Kong, in Seoul, and in Barcelona. And Danni in particular, who is in studio and will be joining us live. So some quick words about the program. You have received it in the link, but it's worth mentioning. We'll have a quick introduction with the CEO of la Banque Cantonale, Mr. Blaise Goetschin. We'll have some key insights from Valérie, Lemaigre, chief economist, that will be useful to set the business relation with this important market. Then I will have the pleasure to animate a round table. And we will end with a Q&A session of 15 minutes. So please don't hesitate to ask on the web platform your questions. I will receive them here on my laptop, and I will be very happy to share your questions with our speakers. So now it's time to introduce Mr. Blaise Goetschin. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Alexandre. Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants, dear members of the Swiss-Chinese Chamber of Commerce, good morning and welcome to this 10th edition of the BCGE Asian Desk series. I would like to begin by warmly thanking our panelists today for their valuable contributions. In the same spirit, I would also like to thank the conference staff for their efforts to produce this event in a format that is both intelligent and digital. After careful consideration, it is not easy to define luxury. Le luxe in French. You have luxury goods and luxury services. They are produced by the luxury industry. Yet, what is luxury? A scientist proposed an ecological definition. Luxury is the possibility for a mother to breastfeed her baby without any traces of pollutants. Probably an impossible target, but this gives us a first indication. Luxury is a rarity. Luxury is exceptional, inaccessible. To a certain extent, we have to admit that luxury is elitist. A more pragmatic approach proposed by a business school professor at HEC Paris compares Porsche and Mercedes. Porsche is a pure luxury product, whereas Mercedes downgraded itself when it introduced more popular brands such as the A-Class. This gives us a second indication. Luxury is a very difficult qualification to obtain. This label, this brand, has to be earned and can be easily lost. High-end, superior, authentic do not mean luxury. Wealthy consumers will exercise this cruel arbitrage between the numerous contender and true luxury products. Customers are the masters of this game. Luxury goods or services must justify high intrinsic quality, best components, best designs, high comfort, ease of use. But this is not enough. The best handcrafted products are not luxury goods. They need a brand. They need a story. Audemars Piguet, Hermès, Veuve Clicquot have a long history. Ralph Lauren, created by Ralph Lifshitz in 1967, and Betty Bossi, Unilever, 1956, are pure brands with more artificial roots. This is not eliminatory, but it does not help. Luxury does not only need historical roots, it also needs to adapt to the rapid changes that define trends. It can influence fashion, but it must also accept being influenced or disrupted by the volatility of fashion. The luxury goods industry is a battlefield. This battlefield is globalized. Today, a luxury brand must be recognized and liked worldwide. It is a multinational business. The globalization of this market ecosystem leads us to focus our attention on Asia and its economic success. In just a few decades, it has virtually become the leading market for luxury goods. It is of the utmost importance to understand the fundamentals of this market, how it works, and the directions it will take in the near long term. This is why today's conference is so interesting, a spiritual luxury. And I am happy to open this session. Valérie Lemaigre, Valérie, our chief economist, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Goetschin. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to share with you the macro picture of the luxury good, and I like to do it through 4 points. If I may show you on the screen the point I like to touch. The first one will be to focus on the Chinese luxury good consumption, which is really the reference market for the luxury good. Secondly, the retail sales, how it was behaving in China during the crisis, to try to extract some lesson for the luxury good sales. That will be the third point. And I'd like to finish this macro picture by reminding you maybe or showing you the exposure of Switzerland and Geneva to this very specific market, luxury goods through China. But let me first start with this exception, let's say China exception during this crisis. Although it was the first in the crisis, it is also the first out. And finally, the Chinese growth for 2020 has reached 2.3%, the unique country that was in positive growth, while in other countries you had a strong recession. The first point that helped China to come out from let's say the drop of the activity was the industrial sector, the manufacturing sector, which was the first to normalize. And this has helped the trade exchanging between all the different countries, including with the US and with Europe, while they are still in lockdown. But manufacturing has recovered. That's the first point. Now, the second point that I like to illustrate on the graph that you have on the screen is to show that the recovery was started with the manufacturing sector. But if we look at China has already recovering retail sales, recovering consumption. The red cycle should be on, let's say, the 2 points that you have on your screen, is just to show with this two-dimension graph that consumption and manufacturing are back to the level previous to the crisis. While if you look at the point that are in the blue color, those ones are connected with the US, and you can see that they are really not back to normality. So consumption is important in China, is starting to be crucial in luxury good, and as I mentioned, they have recovered. Now, let's dig into the retail sales, and then I will mention and focus especially luxury good on that. I'm not talking about services in this sense. But anyway, if you look at the blue dark line, which is the total retail sale, this has recovered to the previous level. And this is really partially thanks to luxury good. And I mentioned here on the graph the subcomponent of cosmetic or even jewelry, watches and cars. And as you can see, the dynamic of those goods has been back to a previous level. This is different if you look at cosmetic to compare with watches, for example, but the pace of growth is quite dynamic. Now, the crucial issue is, of course, China, which is for the consumer good market is around 30%. 30% of the global consumption is due to China. Now, what is important is to understand who is the consumer of luxury good in China. And then we will discuss about that later on. The main contributor to this consumption has to be found in the young generation, especially millennials and even Generation Z, as we call it. That means people between 20 and 40 years old. Those are the ones who are really contributing to the luxury good consumption. Now, back to 2020, I think that there was a characteristic that was important to notice and to extract lesson from that. What was happening in the consumption of luxury goods in China is that traditionally, most of the consumption or the sales, the purchase of luxury good is done through or when they have an experience of travel. When they go to Europe, the popularity of European brands is very high, so they like to have an authentic experience through this purchase of watches or even fashion of Italian products. So they like to have this experience for, as I said, the authenticity of it, but also because the prices in Europe are much lower. What have we seen in 2020 is that although the consumption was lower than the previous year, they had compensated this consumption by purchasing in China, mainland. So most of the purchase, as you can see on the graph, 75% of it was done in China. And how was it possible? Two main efforts or difference to compare with 2019. Online shop was quite important. It reached 25% of the global sales of luxury goods. And second factor is that authorities have really eased the condition of duty-free purchase. So that was the main reason for this, let's say, movement of domestic sales that was quite important in 2020. Now, let's extract some lesson from those macro factors of the Chinese market. First of all, is that the luxury brand has to focus on the millennials, on the young population, because what they look for in this purchase is having an experience, being digital or being an authentic experience. They like to follow, to pursue fashion, and really these are the argument. And if we can also put some figures on this population, it's around 400 million of people, so it's quite a big community for the luxury good. And if I may also add a factor, 70% of these millennials are already homeowners. That means that they are in the middle class and they have they are sufficiently rich to buy those type of experience. Now, the market, the Chinese market, is really important, and what I like to mention before ending is the importance for the resilience of Switzerland. And this is illustrated by the graph on the screen. As you can see, the Swiss export to China has reached in 2020 a record high. So it's not only based on the black line, which shows you the pharma export of Switzerland to China, but it's also due to watch industry, to the watches that were exported there, which really helped Switzerland to resist in this very difficult, turbulent period. And this is also true for Geneva. The proportion of exports of luxury goods, especially watch and jewelry, to China is quite important. It's 85% globally of the export of Geneva, and the Chinese and Asian market for Geneva is around 25%. So it's a big chunk of the export that are going to Asia. So I like to finish on this point. I think it's important to notice that this is a market very important, not only for China, but also for Switzerland. Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Valérie, for all this insight. I do already have a question that maybe I'll try to answer with your help. Do we have any, so somebody's asking on the platform, thank you very much for sharing. Do we have any statistics regarding online sales for luxury watches? So I think there's one of the answer I can recommend, if you agree, is if you go to richemont.com, there are some reports, and they do by channel of distribution. And there is an online report about sales. I think so. I'm going to answer by memory. I don't have the figure with me, so I'll let you check, of course. But you can check, I think, if I recall correctly, for Richemont. So it includes also Yoox Net-a-Porter, of course. But it's 1.6 billion Swiss francs. So, of course, according to the whole turnover that Richemont is doing, it's a proportion, but it's becoming a big number and an important sale. So I invite you, for this person, you can look at Richemont. They have great activity reports. Okay, thank you for sharing these questions. Thank you very much, Valérie. We'll come back on the Q&A session. So now we will be integrating our round table. The first person I'd like to introduce is Michael. Michael, again, thank you very much for your presence today. You're head of complications at Audemars Piguet, and you know very well, you can share a snapshot of the strategy in terms of distribution and other client relationship aspects. So thanks again for being here today. And live from Barcelona, Danni Liu. Thank you, Danni, for being with us. You're a China marketing expert. You've been working for Piaget. Hello, you've been working for Piaget. You've been working also for Chanel in China. And now you're a founding partner of iBlue Communication, making a lot of campaigns and development in digital and e-commerce for luxury brands. Thank you for joining. So I will be starting with giving a snapshot of key elements, some that Valérie, you mentioned a bit earlier. Quickly, China is both a market of volume and value, and I think that makes it really particular. Of course, there are other important regions for our brands in the region, like Middle East, the US. Michael, I think you will mention a bit on that. But it's really important to understand that it's a volume and value, and it's a very important market for our future. We are going through, of course, a health crisis, but there are also opportunities. In any crisis, there's also opportunities. And in China, they've been going through a crisis in the past linked to the luxury industry. It's not their first crisis. For instance, I'm sure many of you remember the SRAS. We didn't experience this in Europe, but they did in Far East Asia. The COVID, of course, currently. Also the anti-corruption events that took place around 5 years ago, which also changed a bit the luxury model for this market. And of course, in Europe, when there was the attentat and the strikes, is also had some impacts in the past. However, it's a very resilient market. And we can see on this chart, and thank you also, Danni, for sharing this, from Boston Consulting Group, the Chinese luxury market accounts, and you mentioned also, Valérie, 30 to 40%. But the perspective for the 5 years to come is really important. China will remain an engine and an important, very important market for all luxury brands, but especially for our region. In the past, and you mentioned also in your chart, customers, Chinese mainland customers, have been less predictive than it used to be until a few years ago. They used to travel and buy luxury products while they were traveling, as we mentioned. It was the main reason. Also was for gifting. There is a price, remains a price difference, of course, due to imports tax in China mainland. But it's not the only reason. I think my colleague will mention it. They also enjoy buying, for instance, in Switzerland, because they like to buy at the origin of the market. So let's not forget this aspect. But the truth is, all these events that we mentioned before have made it more difficult to engage with Chinese clients and less predictive. We mentioned the impact of gifting, tax, also customs. One aspect we need also to understand is sometimes when the clients return to China, they do not necessarily declare their product at customs due to this. So it has some sort of impact on the way we deal with our Chinese customers when they are returning home. There are also some other constraints linked to the market. They are mainly linked to the Chinese world policy and the fact of hosting and data when it comes to digital or CRM. For instance, the ICP, when you would like to develop your presence and e-commerce, you would need to host within China mainland for digital performance, web performance, and requires some specific steps. So it's a globalization market. It's important that we are coherent, for the brands that are coherent between China and other markets, but there are some complexity in terms of technical constraints and CRM. However, keeping the relationship with the client is important. I don't know, Michael, if you agree with that, or
Absolutely.
want to say a word about how do you perceive that customer relationship?
Yeah, I mean, this aspect of the dynamic, what you're touching upon is the essential tension that's being worked out. And over time as well, we're discovering this as time goes on. There are complexities inherent to the structure and how things are done in China. However, that's not preventing brands who are strategic and who have great people on the ground of really bringing that international perspective in. Because while there are aspects that are limiting, there are also aspects that are very, very much global in that sense. And China is no longer closed in that sense whatsoever. When we look at broader cultural strokes, when we look in things like media and film and entertainment industries, as well as luxury, we really start to see more and more cultural dialogue taking place than ever before.
And what's interesting, when we prepared this conference, you mentioned that also at Audemars, you have this relationship, this end client. I think you reviewed your distribution channel. We have read this in the past. That seems to be like a best practice, removing intermediaries and with that approach of having a relationship with the end client, right? You want to...
Absolutely. As a family-run independent company, one of the strategies of our global CEO, François Benamias, has been to shift from a wholesale business to a retail business, which really means B2B to B2C and getting to know your clients more and more and more, really shortening that distance from the watchmaker's bench to the object that's on the wrist of the client, which means we've put great efforts globally in each and every market to get to know our clients more and more, to interact with them more and more. And this comes from the premise that watchmaking, time measurement, the idea of time, isn't separate from culture, it's central to culture. And Audemars Piguet has always been a company of culture. So to be authentic to that idea and to develop and to grow and to enhance those relationships means getting real and getting direct and getting to know people on a very direct and intimate level and understanding them as much as they're coming to understand what we do and what we're about.
Okay, thank you. So the other aspects is, I think, Danni, you'll be mentioning that just after, but we need to remember, it might sound obvious, but we need to remember that it's a huge country with a long history and with a lot of subcultural regions that are very important to understand. Also, the development of the customers' profiles and expectations are really evolving. Danni, if you would like to say a word about it. I can hear you on my side.
Perfect. Now, yes.
Okay. Yes. Now it's good. Thank you.
Yeah. As you see the landscape, China is one China. However, there is many China inside China. So somebody from the north or somebody from the south, they don't necessarily easily to understand each other in terms of culture, in terms of language even. So when we talking about China, bear in mind it's difficult market, very dynamic. Culture is the key. So it's a challenge for brand how to be a one brand, keep your own brand value, however, carry on the difference, talking to different profile of consumer. Even the product portfolio, the service you can provide, the campaign can be very different. And there is another dynamic because there's a different generation buying luxury goods, and extremely now increasing Gen Z and the millennia, they have the specific cultural language. So it's a challenge, but it's a lot of opportunity.
Okay, great. Thank you, Danni. I think you will say another word around it in a few slides. About the China luxury market uniqueness, now I'll pass on to you, Danni. You prepared some slides to understand the market better. One of the things you told me a few days ago is 3 key aspects linked to the opportunities that are currently in this market. Number 1 is increasingly younger crowd. Number 2 is growth, but in lower tier cities. And the era of social commerce, which is not only e-commerce, Michael, you mentioned it to me as well, but is also the digital relationship. What's your thoughts about this, Danni?
Yeah, totally. You've mentioned a lot of data. I would like to give you a very vivid picture, bring you into China to like put a consumer in front of you to really feel how they are. Actually, post-90 and post-80, the Gen Z is already taking 71% of the luxury buyings, and they're very different from traditional luxury buyers. Before, probably somebody in China want to buy big logo, and now it's the age of era like anti-logo. They really want to buy for themselves, to reward themselves. So the kind of brand, how to react with clients, with them, is changing. Like second point, in regards to the growing opportunities in lower tier of Chinese, there is some interesting data. For example, actually 55% of luxury consumers are living in tier 2 city. They're not in tier 1. And even from tier 2, tier 3 city, they share a much higher interest of buying luxury goods compared to tier 1. Why it is happening? I think Tier 1 city, the consumer probably are embraced by big brands. They are the inspirational in the consumer ecosystem. However, due to the high costing of the housing, etc., the kind of the budget they can spend really to improve their life is not necessarily higher than Tier 2 and Tier 3. So this is definitely a great potential we should look into the lower tier city. And the third point highlighted about the era of social commerce. As you know, e-commerce is big in China because we have a good logistic. The Wi-Fi 4G, 5G is like really well fundamentally supported. And then many people, when they buy, I would say 60% of them are inspired by the social channel. The generation, Gen Z and the millennial, they born lonely and they want to have the sense of community. They refer to a lot of information online. They're influenced by the online activities of the celebrity, etc. So social is not only social engagement. Social in China is commerce. And there is a lot of different platforms like a popular Douyin, TikTok in China, popping up to support this new dynamic of sales conversion.
Great, thank you, Danni. Michael, would you like to say a word about about this aspect?
I think Danni summarized it extremely well. It's a pleasure to hear your voice, Danni. It is through our lens of Audemars Piguet, as this smaller company producing 40,000 watches a year, everything she said echoes true with us. The fastest growing demographic for us, especially for the highest end watches we produced, are very young people, as young as 20 and into their early 30s. We see so much growth in this regard, as well as the celebrity and ambassador friendships that we have all over the world, but in China it's particularly strong, having done events there many times and engaged with these people and seeing how the fans react and how the whole communication effort takes place. I agree with Danni completely. It's this intermingling of a commerce and a social dynamic that is ultimately really about identity and self-expression and community. And everything she described, we see it through our lens as well at Audemars Piguet. Of course, it's a much more focal point. It's a smaller focal point, but everything she said echoes true in our experience as well.
Great. Thank you. Another aspect now is the online ecosystem, right, Danni, with different categories that you summarized. If you can say a word about this ecosystem.
Yeah, it's a complex picture, you see. The keywords is it's really quite dynamic. There is super application you can use day to day. You have WeChat, you have Douyin to entertain you. However, there is also very vertical version of each services, etc. So now when we talk about consumer, how they perceive brand to absorb brand information, it's no longer like top down. It's no longer the from awareness to conversion. Maybe in one live streaming, they shorten the decision journey. In 5 minutes, you buy a watch. It's totally possible and it's happening. All the dynamic of the tools existing, the ecosystem existing there is already training our consumer to have the mindset shopping online to buy luxury. And the brand, when they do communication, is not only about own platform. It's like a net. It's from funnel to net.
Right. Okay. And about this made in China digital platforms, there are some specific platforms where it's important. Like, of course, we've heard a lot about the latest announcement between Richemont, Kering, Farfetch, and Alibaba, this joint venture to develop e-commerce, not only in China, I think, therefore a bit more globally as well. If you can say maybe a word about the key platforms that are important to be with.
Yeah, totally. As you see in the slides, China has a rebirth of new version of WhatsApp, Twitter, Google, etc. And first reason is those Western platforms are in a way banned in China. And the Chinese carry on to develop their own. It's getting very big and even upgraded version of the Western one. So the key platform in terms of brand engagement, if you want to keep the relationship, do CRM, talk to consumer, go through the social platform, WeChat is the platform to go. Weibo is similar like Western Twitter. So it's more a platform. If you have broadcasting news, work with celebrity, you can rely on that. Then Little Red Book is another platform. It's like a new version of search engine, but for for luxury goods. Now people don't go Chinese version google.com to search how is the Audemars Piguet watch. They go to Little Red Book to search, to see the review. It's a social commerce, typical example is a best case study of the platform. In terms of entertaining, Douyin, I know it's quite popular in Western. The name is TikTok, but there are two applications. In China, the Douyin, you have a way more different diversity of content, very related to the Gen Z culture approach, and the kind of functionality you can have is also different. The spending hour is average like 1 hour and a half for people staying on Douyin in China. And another category of the platform, very key, is the marketplace where you can shop directly, which is Tmall and the Jingdong.
GD also, I think, Michael, you...
JD, yes.
GD, yeah, right.
Yeah.
So I think, Michael, you at Audemars Piguet, I think you did an initiatives with GD recently.
Indeed. For us, we generally use the e-platforms for communication and engagement, but in some markets, we are starting to move towards e-commerce types of interactions. In particular, China, as Danni said earlier, given the geographic map, of course, we have points of sale in Beijing and Shanghai, and we're growing, but we don't have many points of sale. We're not very visible, and China's a huge country. And to use her term, tier 2 cities are people there's people there who we have not been able to engage with, nor are we able to in the near term. So what we did was teamed up with JD.com to allow certain models to be acquired through e-commerce, but always with the white glove delivery service. We still always need that human touch, to such a point at Audemars Piguet that in fact the very first delivery we did in China through this platform, our global CEO, Mr. Benamias, was the one who personally delivered the watch with his white gloves on. But for us, it always has to be a bridge back to IRL, back to in real life. The digital platforms are wonderful for communication, for engagement, for deep diving. All of this is critical. And as mentioned, to reach people that are outside the scope of our brick and mortar locations. But the goal ultimately is to be able to sit across from someone and enjoy a cup of tea or a coffee or a glass of wine and really get to know them better.
That's interesting. Huh? You see also GD, right, Danni, not only as a selling platform as such, but a way to engage with customers that are really spread out, because we talk about a huge area and a huge population. So it's a way to engage with them as well and build a relationship. There's a CRM dimension by going through platforms like GD, right?
It's also a reality, Alex. I mean, there are many people, not just the Gen Z and Gen X, but even into middle age and older, who don't want to go into a shop and interact with a person. They want to do this from the privacy of their home. There is something about that interaction that also, that I would say, that isolated aspect that's important for many, many people. So that's something we can't lose sight of as well. At Audemars Piguet, that's why we've shifted to the AP houses, which are not a boutique. They're not at the storefront. These are in condominiums. These are in elevated buildings or isolated buildings where it's really a non-transactional environment. And that's the key, is how do you balance the increasing transactional platforms, because as many clients who want that are also looking for non-transactional. Again, back to that cultural connection, those personal connections, that people-to-people vibe. So we're balancing this by, yes, we're starting to touch upon more digital activities, but we're also offsetting that with our AP houses, which are essentially places to hang out and enjoy and get to know a little bit about watchmaking culture and our various efforts in broader culture.
That's something personally I've been quite impressed at Audemars Piguet is the launch of your loft, and thinking about hospitality in a new way to interact with customers. I think that's interesting vision. Thank you for sharing, Michael.
Absolutely.
So I have 6 minutes left before I absolutely would like to keep this 15 minutes, and we do have questions flooding in, so thank you, the audience, for sharing. I'm reading your questions, and I will need to make sure we have time. What I suggest maybe, we already shared quite a few, so if you agree, maybe we can switch, quickly go to the slides about 11/11. As you know, it's the biggest worldwide e-commerce results lately, so I will move into that and the power of this 11/11. Danni, if you can say a word about the latest amazing results. I think we thought in 2019 we already reached and broke a record, and we thought, okay, we may have reached the ceiling, and apparently not. There's still room for more.
Yeah. You see, 2030 it's like 60-something billion, and the Double 11 here is the data of one wave of campaign. So Double 11 is you prepare for the teasing, pre-sale, you can do pre-order, but you cannot really buy for 20 days. And then in the last day, November 11, that's why we call it Double 11. That day, you clean your shopping cart, you shop, and it's 1 day sales record. So it's quite amazing, like seven Black Friday.
Yeah.
Yes, 7 times. So actually, like on the e-commerce, it's not only a place for merchants in China, it's a place for entertaining. That's why consumer engage on the e-commerce. It's like going to a physical shopping mall. They go online, it's the digital version. Even you open application of Tmall, application of the JD, the kind of design interactive, it's super immersive, super experiential. It's not like a display of the product. And there is a lot of functionality, like you can go live streaming. You sell even a rocket in live streaming. It has happened, like 10 million space rockets being sold in live streaming. And there is, I would say, before, when we have a store, we think about we need to go to luxury shopping mall, and I want to see who is my neighbor. If my neighbor is in the same level, to create the atmosphere of luxury with me together. Now we are going to Tmall, the marketplace. The first question is it a relevant platform for hardcore luxury? I would say 95% of beauty already on that. However, now what we see is Cartier is getting to Tmall, the hardcore luxury, Piaget, Cherchez Le Good, and many Richemont brands. Also fashion house like Gucci, they are all on Tmall. And this Double 11, I would say this is 2003 Double 11. In the first 3 minutes, the turnover is 12 million. So consumer is ready. The new shopping mall, luxury shopping mall on Tmall is ready. And the market has a great potential.
And just a figure, so I don't know if the audience can read on the third part, but there's more luxury brands who joined this campaign. 564 who did the specific campaign with specific activation for 11, and 65 hard luxury brands, so with a price point that is high, right?
Yeah, exactly. Don't underestimate the budget they have buying online.
Yeah, and also let's not forget, these are also publicly traded entities and brands, regardless of the average price point, where they have real KPIs that they have to meet to appeal to their shareholders. So any publicly traded luxury brand is going to take advantage of any platform they have to increase their turnover. So if you do look deeper into the data, you will find that the private and family businesses tend to be slower or more reticent to jump onto those types of new trends. There tends to be a differential at that point between publicly traded and private high-end luxury when it comes to utilizing these types of platforms.
Okay, indeed. Okay. Also, maybe one last slide so I can keep a few minutes, Michael, with some snapshots that you prepared for us.
Sure.
Thank you. Danni, I think when we talk about China, there are some moments not to be missed. The calendar is a bit particular and important to address. If you can say a word about it.
Yeah. I think there are three types of festival. One is really e-commerce festival. Consumer looking for good deals. Is the moment you can give a product excitement for them to offer service, etc. They are looking for the benefit. In luxury, not necessarily discount, but a kind of experience you can offer. The another category of the festival in China, really important, is linked with the Western traditional festival, like Western Valentine's Day, the Christmas, this kind of love season. The key insight is gifting. So the kind of approach we should talk about how you prepare gifting, the packaging is important, etc. And then there is a traditional festival in China, like Chinese New Year, Chinese Valentine's Day. So in summary, like every month you have something to celebrate. Yeah. It's exciting.
There are
a lot of opportunities.
So there are many opportunities linked to the calendar and the culture in China. That is worth. Yeah. I think there is also around October, this national holiday. We call it the Golden Week, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it's 7 days. You can prepare for travel out. It's good for travel retail business if everything's going well.
Right. Just maybe to end on this part, thank you, Danni. If we can summarize this, to win the e-commerce moment, there's product excitement to be built, bet on advocacy, and please don't forget the experience. It's not the same way of buying online in China than it can be in other platforms in Europe, right?
Yeah, exactly. And the experience is not only online, it's also offline. It's more immersive. And the line is merged.
Yeah, and you mentioned the packaging, for instance, to do a specific packaging for Chinese New Year or for Mother's Day. These sort of particular activations are important.
Yeah, it's more about speak the right culture.
Right. Okay, thank you. Sorry, I need to rush. There are some aspects. So thank you. Maybe we'll keep a few minutes, 2-3 minutes, if you can. I'm sorry,
no, I'm
Michael.
happy to get to the Q&A as well. Just to share a couple slides over here, we talked a little bit, we've been talking about digital, but we also need to speak about the power of IRL and real experience and engagement on that type of level as well. Here's an image of the Musée Atelier Audemars Piguet, which was recently completed. The architect Bjarke Ingels from Big Group constructed this. We're now working towards our hotel. The idea here is to immerse people in the universe of this business and to follow the journey of time measurement and timekeeping. And of course, we welcome collectors and visitors and enthusiasts worldwide. But we also were giving virtual and digital representations of this as well, given the situation we're in right now. But this speaks to the history of the company as being family-run, independent, but also that eye towards the future and towards the deep future, and that real balance of constantly looking ahead and looking forward. In terms of what we talked about earlier, Alex, we don't have many points of sale, hence why we dove into some of the e-commerce platforms in China. We have far greater demand than we do supply, and we've been moving from wholesale to retail. So there's only 152 locations in the world, and that's even going to be cut more, where you can even see an Audemars Piguet in real life, which is again why, whether it's transactional or non-transactional, the digital engagement remains very important.
Right.
Here's that breakdown. We can move on to the next because I think it's more illustrative given our time crunch. So you can see here, echoing all of the statements, going back to the wonderful introduction, by the way, that was great. You can see Asia is very strong at 40% for Audemars Piguet. I want to remind you, though, that's not just China. That's also including Japan, Singapore, Southeast Asia, all of which are very, very strong markets. But nevertheless, the message is clear. 40% of our sellout took place in Asia in 2020, which is echoing all of the data that my colleagues here have been referring to. But we at the same time look to balance it globally. And lastly, what does Audemars Piguet do, or what have we done recently in China specifically? For the last 15 years, we've been creating market editions. These are editions which have a little bit of cultural touch points. What was interesting is 2020 happened to be the year for the China edition. It was their turn. We had done them for many, many other countries, and there are more coming. So this occurred, we did the launch, that's a picture of the launch. This took place in Beijing at the very beginning of the year, right before COVID really broke out, or really was even known at that point. And it was quite interesting timing because the China launch coupled with our strategy to focus on domestic clients. This was a global strategy. It's not just China. There's also many other countries where people buy overseas. So we ended up in a fascinating year where between the China edition watch and between the global effort to focus on local clients, we've really been able to develop our market with local Chinese across the country in an unprecedented way for us. And it's going to, of course, have a great echo chamber moving forward business-wise into the future. This is just a little snapshot of that very last project. So the timing was very, very interesting in that sense, and that also contributed to the great results. In terms of the millennials, it's very important to point out that some of the design aesthetics of this watch, the contributions were from one of our very young Chinese collectors. He's Chinese-Canadian, actually. And he gave us some design notes which helped fuel the ultimate watch that you see there. So we even incorporated an early 20-something Chinese gentleman to help with the aesthetics of this particular timepiece.
And it's perfect comment, Michael, because while we're reaching now this Q&A, and thank you, I have many questions to ask. But one of them on your point, Michael, somebody is asking the shortening distance between watches manufacturers and customers, the fact that we are getting closer to them.
Yes.
That's a perfect example on this watch design. Will it lead to the end of distributors and intermediaries?
I think that the publicly traded watch companies will continue with the more classic distribution model for the obvious reasons of needing to post quarterly growth. To post quarterly growth or to strive towards quarterly growth, you need to have many, many different aspects in place. And the classical distribution networks will still remain in place to a large degree. For us, it's definitely we're moving away from it, and I can anticipate other family-run and or independent companies in our sector moving towards a similar distribution model into the future. It really is contingent upon that primary criteria. That's the criteria ultimately as to how you're going to operate this type of business. Because even within luxury, even within watchmaking, there's two industries right now, those that are public, those that are private. Both have wonderful watches, wonderful talents, and wonderful approaches to business, but they're fundamentally different. From R&D all the way through to client experience. These are two industries working in parallel today.
Right. Interesting question also. Danni, maybe would you like to share a comment about the omni-channel, what you're experiencing? Because you also have as other industries in your portfolio. So what is your view on the omni-channel? Can we hear Danni?
Yeah. I said omni-channel is a perfect tool empower brands to reach consumer in short term and make the conversion. A typical one is the live streaming, as I mentioned before. If you do a campaign to approach a consumer, probably it takes 1 month at least to make a decision. Let them make a decision.
I think
you need to have the magazine, you have TV, etc. Yeah.
I think I remember last year, okay, it was not 2020, it was 2019, but I think for Lancôme, you did once like a live broadcast, an interaction between clients in China and Paris.
Exactly.
So there are some new omni-channel, new way to engage also online.
Yeah, you can broadcast everything now. Like there is no border cross over the country. So what's happening now is because there is a limit of location, you can host a big event, you impress the consumer. So live streaming become the channel. I see many brands, we also operate a few, like a cross-border bringing luxury experience, event experience in Western, even in studio like now, and we broadcast to China and the link lively talk to consumer. So in China, the consumer will not confuse. I mean, like if you go to talk to them in a very young digital way, if your brand already solid, your luxury brand, they will not feel it's damaging your image.
Right.
It's just a way, the channel, to talk to them in the comfortable and more effective way.
Another question from the auditor. I received many questions, so thanks a lot. Are marketing expenses shifting from traditional media to digital or other media platforms? Maybe Danni and then Michael, as you want. Danni, do you notice any shift of investment, of media investment?
Yeah. When I was in Chanel, I'm the one spending money for the media budget. So it's interesting comparison because 5 years ago in China, how the budget split and compared to now when we prepare the budget, definitely where's the consumer, where your money should go. So most of them, they're active in Douyin, they're active in social platform, is where you go. However, it's not only about the display media. The money goes more and more to content, and the content can be also advertised. For example, more budget shift into the feeds advertising on Douyin, like Chinese version TikTok. You produce a very fun, engaging video, short videos, and you broadcast it. This is one part of budget shifting, and another is the influencer. So for many brands, the money spending on the influencers are already surpassing by your traditional digital display advertising. When I say the traditional, it's not the offline media. For digital display, for us, it's already traditional media buy.
Okay.
Yeah, this is another shift. Many money to influencers.
Would you like to say a word about it,
Yeah,
Michael?
I think it's a great question. And from a brand perspective, there is a shift taking place, but it's also not either or. It's a bit of an eclipse. In other words, let me give a quick anecdote. Imagine we're doing an event at AP House, which is a traditional brand kind of event where we have a beautiful dinner and a chef. But then at some point in that evening, the AP House will be able to connect virtually. We're already been doing this for quite a while with the watchmakers atelier in Switzerland.
Oh,
so, and there we have the watchmakers and the restorers and the experts talking about the different objects, whereas historically we would have flown people out. That doesn't make sense anymore. And in fact, it's more authentic to see the watchmakers in their actual workshops.
Yeah.
So it's also a fusion that's taking place between IRL and digital, and that's where the real creativity, what Danni refers to as content creation. The other important notion that the current crisis has resulted in is depth. We're getting a lot more real and a lot deeper with content. People are the notion that, people tune out after 5 minutes. That's over. This last year has proved if the content is good, people will engage. Whether you're binge watching a show on Netflix or whether you're following a conference like this for an hour and a half, it doesn't matter. If there's good content and depth, people want to be part of it.
Thank you. Great. A question for you, Valérie, from the audience is: do we think that the Chinese will lower the import duties and taxes in the near term and to further encourage the domestic consumption within China mainland?
So first of all, regarding the taxes, they have already proved to develop some agreement to try to do it with Switzerland a few years ago. Apparently, as we were mentioning, preparing this discussion, it's not so much affecting the watch industry. But anyway, it seems that for luxury goods, the taxes has been reduced with Switzerland. So I think this is a point. We have seen also a new agreement with Europ. So I think that could also help this reduction of taxes with Europ. So I think the way it's to help, let's say, this consumption. Now, regarding the mainland, and that was one of my conclusions of 2020, is that it seems that really the year of 2020 has shown that Chinese like to buy domestic brand also in luxury good, and like to buy mainland. And you was mentioning about the two-tier cities. That was really the conclusion of some studies I read to prepare this conference, which was done by Bain and McKinsey, and they were showing that yes, the future is also inside China.
It's in the domestic inside.
Exactly, in the mainland sales.
Which is rather good news, and with less price differences. Okay, thank you. Another interesting question. So thank you for sharing again. It's about pre-owned. So we know it's a trend, and this person is asking the question is, how do you see pre-owned in this context of also more e-commerce and digital? Will it compete, or how do we see that new trend?
It's a new emerging parallel business that the brands are increasingly getting involved in directly. Let's not forget auction houses have been doing this for 250 years, right? Christie's and Sotheby's. Yeah. Brands, including Audemars Piguet, are getting involved with increasing levels, increasing depth, and increasing partnerships. But it's also largely viewed, at least by us, as much about customer service and experience more so than profitability. And let me explain. The margins of pre-owned are obviously much smaller than a margin on something that you're manufacturing and that you're creating. So for those of you who are looking at the analytics of pre-owned, just don't look at the gross. The gross is impressive. The net is not a fraction of what you're going to see from manufacturing. So we view it as a very important parallel business, but it's more about client service and experience and engagement than it is a path towards big profitability. Sure, there will be some profitability and some growth there, but when you're looking at pre-owned, margins are very fundamentally different when you're going from manufacturing to sales. I mention this because this is a data point that has been largely ignored, not on our side of the fence, but even on the broader economic discussions about pre-owned. It's very important business, but what's the focal point of it? What's the ultimate end game there? Is it to look after your client, wanting them to acquire something great through digital means or directly, or is it a way for companies to make more money? I view it as the prior, not the latter. The profits will come if the business is done right, and if the client is respected, and if the watches are respected, or the other luxury goods are respected. The profits will follow. Those who are trying to invert it are not going to succeed, and we've already seen many pre-owned establishments that had huge funding. We've already seen many of them come and go over the last 3 years. So it has to be the right equation and the right balance.
Okay, fantastic. I have one last. We reached the end. I have maybe a few seconds. There's a question for you, Mr. Goetschin, from the audience, who asked that Banque Cantonale Genève has a representation office in Hong Kong. So do you think that is important for the bank to develop its activities in the Asian market?
Oh, sure. We started in 2010, so we are there since 10 years. It's a small team. Our first mission is to help the Swiss, and particularly the Geneva company, to better understand, not only big giants or big company established, but also new company, SMEs, that are interesting in all sort of markets, to help to understand. It's also very important for the bank to have an open window on Asia, based in Hong Kong.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So yes, indeed,
Yes.
Asian is a key market for most of us in our activities. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for the audience to join us. Thank you all our panel of speakers. It was a pleasure for me to moderate and prepare this conference. And I wish you a fantastic day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
Thank you.